Hello and welcome to a weekend news episode of the Leveraging AI podcast, a podcast that shares practical, ethical ways to leverage AI to improve efficiency, grow your business, and advance your career. This is Isar Metis, your host, and we have another completely crazy week in AI news, episode 191 of this podcast. Back at the end of May of this year was called the craziest week in AI news. That's what I call the episode because we had Microsoft Build and Google I/O events, plus some big news from Claude and so on. And this week may be as crazy as that week. First of all, as you probably know, we got GPT-5, but we also got Claude Opus 4.1. We got multiple additional model releases. We got really big funding news from multiple companies. And we even got a prime minister who publicly admitted for using ChatGPT and consulting with ChatGPT before making decisions. More about that towards the end of the episode, but we have really a lot to cover and we could have probably recorded 3 episodes this week. So I will try to focus on GPT-5 and some big news and then to run very quickly through the rapid fire items. So let's get started. Now, I assume you thought I'm going to start with GPT-5, but I'm not. I'm going to start with a different piece of news that I found very interesting, and it's going to lead perfectly into GPT-5. So Menlo Ventures just revealed that Anthropic is currently leading the race in enterprise adoption. So based on their findings, the current enterprise market share for Anthropic is 32%, followed by OpenAI with 25%, then Google with 20%, then Meta with 9%, and then DeepSeek with 1%. I must admit, I found this surprising. Now, to be fair, full disclosure, Menlo Ventures is a big investor in Anthropic, so they may have a interest in sharing these kind of news or maybe manipulating the numbers. But for now, these are the numbers that we have. Now, the killer app that pushes this over the edge and gives Anthropic this lead is that 42% of programming market chooses Claude versus 21% that chooses OpenAI. This has driven Anthropic's revenue to $3 billion annually, which is 1,000% year-over-year growth, 10x. Combine that with their ease of integration for MCPs, which I personally really, really like, and I'm really frustrated for not being able to do this, at least not as easily on OpenAI, and you get the perfect storm where more and more organizations and enterprises prefer Claude over ChatGPT. Now, for both companies, the majority of the revenue comes from enterprise clients, and hence OpenAI had to invest a lot in making sure that the GPT-5 can become the leading model for enterprise use. And I think that drove a lot of the delays because they had to make sure that it's going to be better than Claude in 2 key factors. One is solving enterprise level problems, and the other is in coding, which leads us to the release of GPT-5 this week. So this was highly anticipated. There were a lot of rumors. It was very clear that it's coming this summer. And then it was very clear that it was getting pushed a little later this summer. And then in the last couple of weeks, it became imminent. And here we are. We got the GPT-5 released on August 7 on a big event with a live stream from OpenAI that was very impressive, very well orchestrated. And I'm going to break down to you both what happened at that event, as well as the actual features and capabilities on GPT-5. Why is it a big deal, or why maybe it's not such a big deal, and what it's not a big deal at. And we'll have a detailed conversation about everything you need to know about GPT-5, at least based on what we know right now. So the first thing is it was the fastest rollout I ever remember OpenAI doing. They rolled it out to everybody from free users all the way to the highest $200 a month pro tier. And they did it all in the same day, at least from what I know. Like everybody I've seen posting stuff got access on the day they made the announcement. Usually it takes them a few weeks. Sam Altman called it a significant step along the path to AGI. And the things that he mentioned that it's still lacking, or that we know from previous things that he said, is that it still lacks continuous learning, meaning it cannot learn on its own without running through another training path, which is a big part of AGI. But other than that, it's a very big step in the right direction. They shared multiple benchmarks, which I'm not going to bore you with, but it's doing really well across all different benchmarks. Surprisingly, they showed mostly their own models, meaning they're outperforming O3 and O1 and obviously 4.0, and they very rarely actually showed other third-party models and how they're performing compared to them, which is never a good sign in my perspective. They had a huge focus on coding and programming. So not surprising based on what I told you before on how Anthropic is kicking their behinds when it comes to coding and how that is impacting the entire enterprise market. They invested a lot in developing the model and invested a lot during its presentation to show how good it is in coding. They shared anything from basic vibe coding capabilities of creating really cool things that I'm very tempted to try. And to be fair, I already tried and it wasn't working very well. More on that in one of the next episodes that we will share on this podcast, either this coming Tuesday or the following one. But they shared a lot of really impressive vibe coding examples, but they also shared professional examples with professional developers and how well is GPT-5 performing for them. They've done even more than that. If you watch the entire video to the end on YouTube, the next video that pops up in the playlist is an interview that they've done with the CEO of Cursor, deep diving into this topic. They also had him obviously in the initial launch, and he was praising the model, saying how smart it is, how fast it is, how better it is in understanding bigger pieces of code, and how it now is the default model for anybody who uses Cursor. Cursor is one of the star companies of the AI coding era, and so that's a big statement. I don't know how much money they paid Cursor in order to make that announcement, if at all, but it is very, very obvious that they invested a lot, both on the development of the model as well as on the PR side of how good it is in coding. Another interesting aspect that they focused on was the health query performance of GPT-5, saying that it as good as multiple doctors. They created a new benchmark on their own with 250 physicians from across the country who gave it scores on different things that it can do in the healthcare understanding, and it scored very, very high on that benchmark. They brought in a woman called Carolina Millen, who shared on how ChatGPT was able to help her translate a complex biopsy report, which was not in plain English and she couldn't understand anything, and helping her really weigh the pros and cons of different treatment decisions, and how GPT-5 has done significantly better job in doing this, which she is now highly recommending to people when you're getting either really scary news about cancer or any other kind of medical report with different suggestions for treatment, on how you can use GPT-5 in order to help you understand what it means and what are the different options and the pros and cons of it. Another very important aspect that they shared is that GPT-5 is, and now I'm quoting, by far the most reliable, most factual model ever. And again, they shared multiple comparisons to O3 and O4, in which GPT-5 has significantly fewer hallucinations. The exact parameters are not for simple people. So one of them was hallucination rate on open source prompts. The other is response level error in ChatGPT traffic prompts, which I don't really know exactly what that means. But in all these cases that I'm sure were very well handpicked, it's showing significant improvement and significantly lower hallucinations than previous models, again, compared to their own models and not compared to third-party models. The context window was also improved, and improved even dramatically on the API side. So it now has 256,000 tokens versus the 200,000 tokens of O3. On the API, you're getting 400,000 tokens, which is becoming very significant. And they're claiming very high results on the benchmarks of very few mistakes once you get closer to the end of the context window, which is obviously very important. Speaking of the API, there are 3 variants of the model on the API: large, medium, and small, kind of like in a lot of other releases that we've seen. They're calling them just GPT-5, GPT-5 Mini, and GPT-5 Nano. And they obviously come with different levels of reasonings and capabilities, but also with very different levels of pricing, where the full model is still cheaper than the previous models, which is amazing. So GPT-5 through the API is going to cost $1.25 for 1 million input tokens and $10 for output tokens. That's cheaper than O3. And then the nano model, the smallest one, is going to be 25 times cheaper than that. So you can get a lot of intelligence fast for a little bit of money. Additional improvements include they introduced what they call safe completion, which, and I'm quoting, tries to maximize helpfulness with safety constraints. Basically, it's trying, instead of refusing to answer specific questions, to answer as much as it can without providing any problematic information, which I think is a better setup than what they had before of just not answering specific questions. They also shared a very interesting thing on how they trained this model, and they used O3 as a teacher that built a curriculum for GPT-5 to teach GPT-5 complex topics. And what they said that is, instead of just creating synthetic data, they created a learning curriculum, an actual training plan for GPT-5 in order for it to learn better, faster, and get better results. I find this really interesting, and I find this really promising because, as you heard me say many times on this podcast, I think AI represents the biggest opportunity we have to generate personalized learning for people and to allow people to learn anything they want faster, better, and in a more effective way without needing a human instructor, or at least with less help from a human instructor or teacher. And so the fact that they were able to do this for GPT-5 gives me a solid idea that they could most likely do this for humans. More about that in a minute. They also made significant adjustments and updates to the voice mode. So they're claiming, and I'm now quoting, sounds incredibly natural, like you're speaking to a real person. And they also added video capability, so the AI can see what you see while it is chatting with you. That was available before on the mobile app, and now it's going to be available everywhere. And a big improvement when it comes to voice is that they said now voice is going to be available for custom GPTs, which I find huge because it means you can build custom GPTs that will use voice, meaning you can interact with the content and the instructions and not just through text and images. And I think this will be extremely powerful, and it opens a whole entire range of use cases for individuals and for companies. So combine these last two facts together with what they released last week, which is the ChatGPT study mode, and you see why I'm very optimistic. You can now upload whatever information, describe your current level, and have ChatGPT teach you based on a questions and answers, examples, cheat sheet, cards, whatever you want, and work with you step by step in order to teach you a different topic. Combine it with a new programming skills that allows it to create interactive demos for learning purposes. They've demoed one that was very, very impressive during the video of introducing GPT-5. And so you get a very powerful learning platform within OpenAI's ChatGPT's regular interface that can hopefully trickle to a lot of other places through the API and allow people to develop much more user-friendly and personalized learning paths for anything. I'm going to try to build mine for myself for learning bass. I started playing bass on a very late age, less than 2 years ago, and I really want to make progress. And I'm going to try to create customized learning paths for myself using ChatGPT, including interactive exercises that it will do with me. I will report whether that was successful or not. I will probably save you listening to me playing bass, but I will share with you what was the success from building the training plan around it. They also made what they called a lot of enhancements to GPT memory with the goal of GPT knowing more about you. I must admit, this is one of the best features of ChatGPT. One of the reasons I use it more than I use Gemini and Claude for business-related stuff is that it just knows me. It understands my business. It understands my clients. It understands the value that I'm providing. And because of that, it provides me significantly more value when it comes to business-specific tasks. I still go to Gemini for research. I still go to Claude for code. That may change with GPT-5. But again, as of the initial tests that I've done, that's not really the case. But from a memory perspective, it's definitely by far ahead of its competitors right now, which gives a lot of value if you understand how to use it. And the last thing that I will mention that they announced is they announced that for pro users, ChatGPT will have access to Gmail and Google Calendar, in addition to Google Drive, providing basically understanding of who you are, what you do, and allowing it to act as an assistant working across multiple tasks and having a lot more knowledge about who you are and what you do. I would not be surprised if they open this to everybody else, just because similar capabilities exist in Gemini and in Claude right now. So I would assume they would open it at least to all the paid tier members. That by itself opens a whole can of worms when it comes to cybersecurity, and more about that in a few minutes. They brought experts from multiple fields showing how they're using it in life sciences, including developing new drug design, in finance, to do financial data analysis significantly faster, in healthcare for clinical reasoning and reviewing medical insurance claim, and for government, which, by the way, they announced they're going to provide GPT-5 to all government employees for $1, which basically means the government is getting it for free. But after all these details, let's talk about the big picture for a minute, what it does, what it doesn't, what it means, and so on. First of all, it is a model that is unifying all the different models into one. You literally don't have any more choice anymore. So if you go to ChatGPT right now and you look at the dropdown for the models you have GPT-5, you have GPT-5 Thinking, and you have GPT-5 Pro if you are a Pro user. That's it. All the other models that existed before just vanished. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it saves you from figuring out which model does what better and trying to guess what you need to choose for your specific tasks. It combines all of them together and it basically decides what it needs to think about and how long it needs to think. That's why it provides a perfect balance between time and quality of results, which is great for every task that we're doing. It's awesome for coding. It connects directly to what the CEO of Cursor said, that you're getting a lot of intelligence very, very fast, which is awesome. Again, it is great. The disadvantages, a lot of people have built a lot of processes, including custom GPTs, that already work, that provide consistent results across multiple aspects of the business. And they don't necessarily need better intelligence or faster speed. They just need consistency. And if this new model that now replaced everything because you can't go back is going to break that consistency, then you will have to rebuild a lot of things that you built before. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. All I'm saying is they should have at least kept the option to go to the older models and use them for those cases in which GPT-5 will break existing processes, especially custom GPTs. So from a rollout perspective, as somebody myself that ran software companies for over 20 years, this is a weird way to roll out basically, oh, we are hoping there's going to be backward compatibility. We're not 100% sure. It's on you to figure it out. Good luck. I haven't seen any backlash about it yet, but I assume we're going to start seeing stuff in the next few days. If big things happen, I will obviously report it to any of you. On the API side, everything still exists. So that's kind of like your fallback plan. If you build stuff around it, you can still obviously choose any of the previous models to do whatever it is that you were doing with the API previously. So from an achievement perspective, what does this achieve and does it achieve? And what does it tell us and does it tell us? I think the one thing that is becoming clear is that the traditional ways of training models is getting to the point of diminishing returns. That was obvious towards the end of last year, and then reasoning models came out and completely broke the equation and changed stuff. But I think the reality is what we're seeing is that we're either running out of data or running out of faster or better ways to train models, but the old school of training models is aligning to a level where I think eventually all the models will get to. What the new models will do is they will find better and better ways to make it relevant and useful for us on our day-to-day and on our business lives, which I think is the only thing that actually matters, right? We don't really care how good is the underlying model. What we care is how easy it is to use and how much value it is providing to us for how much money and how fast. And if you can build a model like GPT-5 that maximizes all of those variables, you're building a better outcome for the users, which is exactly what OpenAI did. So I don't know how much better ChatGPT is really behind the scenes, the backbones compared to O3 or O1 or 4.0 or whatever it is that you want to compare it to, or other models. What is very, very clear is that they've built a model that is really easy to use, that provides high value results quickly across a huge variety of topics. They're claiming, by the way, that it's PhD level across multiple aspects. I didn't test that. I don't know if anybody else tested that. I'm sure we'll get some feedback about it in the next few weeks. But as I mentioned, what is very clear is that they made it very easy and friendly to use while providing really high value results. And I believe we're going to continue to see more and more of that come from all the major labs at least until the next breakthrough when something else happens, or a completely different way to train models that is not going to be based on the current architecture and the way things are done. Now, a launch like this cannot go without any controversy, and we're going to talk about a bunch of it, but you can't have a good controversy without Elon Musk being involved. So shortly after the announcement by OpenAI, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella posted that GPT-5 was launching across Microsoft platforms, including Microsoft 365 Copilot, Copilot Standalone, GitHub Copilot, and Azure Foundry. And then immediately Musk responded by tweeting, OpenAI is going to eat Microsoft alive. Now, if you have been following this podcast in these past few weeks, I shared with you that OpenAI is potentially developing a competitor to Microsoft Office, basically an Office suite that will be AI-centric, that will be a direct competition to the core business of Microsoft. In addition, we spoke many times before about Microsoft's complete dependency from an AI perspective on OpenAI right now, despite the amount of money and the hiring that they've done in order to develop their own AI. As of right now, they're completely dependent on OpenAI, and the latest discussions on how their partnership is going to evolve and what share they're going to get in the company and what is AGI and not AGI and how long can OpenAI or not stop them from getting their models when AGI comes. All of that is showing how much Microsoft is actually dependent on OpenAI. So that statement from Elon doesn't surprise me, but Satya did not obviously stay quiet, and he reminded Musk that he's now a Microsoft partner as well. So if you remember, in May, Microsoft announced that they're going to start offering Grok as part of the models that are available on Azure. And he was very polite and said about what Musk said. Satya wrote, people have been trying for 50 years. That's relating obviously to what Musk said about OpenAI eating them alive. And then he continued, and that's the fun of it. Each day, you learn something new and innovate, partner, and compete. Excited about Grok 4 on Azure and looking forward to Grok 5. So Satya got out of this gracefully, like he always does. And then Sam Altman was asked about this exchange on the CNBC Squawk Box, and Altman responded, I don't think about him that much, referring to Elon Musk. So again, fun exchange by some of the people that are ruling the world right now, showing you the very different characters and how they handle big announcements. But now back to real news. Just before GPT-5 announcements, OpenAI shared a few staggering numbers and important information. So first of all, their annualized revenue has hit $12 billion pace in July of 25. That's up from $5.5 billion in December of 2024. So it's more than doubled in just 7 months. And a $12 billion pace means they're generating $1 billion a year in revenue. In addition, they share they hit 700 million weekly active users. That's 4x than a year ago, and a big jump even from March, where it was 500 million weekly users. They also share they have 5 million paying business users, which has been fueling and driving this growth, as I shared before, going back to the beginning of this episode and their competition with Anthropic. Now, with that, obviously, their cash burning rate is also growing, and it's projected to be $8 billion in 2025, up $1 billion from their earlier estimates. Where did that $1 billion go? Well, first of all, I would not be surprised if some of it went to Cursor, going back to my previous comments about how they're now the default model in that. But we're going to talk about their bonuses to their employees in a minute. And they just closed a big funding round as well that I'm going to talk about in the funding rounds segment of this episode. So a huge growth for OpenAI, still way ahead of the current Anthropic pace of $3 billion annualized revenue, though, as I mentioned, they doubled in the last 6 months, and Anthropic has grew 1,000%, so 10x. So Anthropic is growing faster based on what we've heard from one source. They're getting more market share as of right now, but they're not close to the size of OpenAI as of right now. Now, while GPT-5 stole the thunder, OpenAI made another really big release earlier in the week, and they released 2 open source models for the first time since GPT-2 in 2019. Now, this again is something that was highly anticipated, that was pushed back several times, but they finally launched GPT-OSS 120B and GPT-OSS 20B, 2 sizes of open source models released under an Apache 2 license, which basically means you can use it and customize it across multiple use cases. And it matches or exceeds O4 Mini's capabilities. So it's not as good as the latest thinking models. It's definitely not good as GPT-5, but it's definitely a very solid open source contender that can compete with O4 Mini across multiple benchmarks. They're also saying it outperforms O3 Mini on several specific benchmarks, and that it can, in theory, the smallest model can run on devices that had 16 gigabytes of memory, which means if you have a strong enough home computer, you should, again, in theory, be able to run this model on your computer, which is obviously a very big deal. It means that companies can host this on their servers and get relatively solid responses very fast without exposing the data to anything outside their universe, which is a huge benefit of open source models. Now, it took them a while to release these models. They're saying there were a lot of safety issues, and they shared that safety was a priority and that they've done rigorous testing about it. They're also offering $500,000 red teaming challenge to allow people in the industry to test the models and provide them fixes in order to improve the safety of the model. Now, both sides of models support chain of thought reasoning. It can use tools such as web search and Python, etc., like most of the models today. And you can adjust its reasoning effort from low, medium, and high through the API, which again just gives you more control over speed and results. It has 128,000 tokens context window, which is definitely a fair size. It's not as big as some other open source models, but it's enough for most daily tasks that companies are doing. So is it a huge deal? It is a huge deal because OpenAI started as an open source company to support humanity, then changed to a completely closed source company, and now they're releasing open source again. That being said, there are a lot of other really solid open source contenders. Obviously, Meta with Llama is the biggest and most known one, but you have Mistral in France, which you're going to talk about later on in the financing segment of this episode, and several different powerful models from China like Qwen and DeepSeek that are also open source. Now, as I mentioned earlier, OpenAI just gave huge bonuses to some of its employees, and apparently about 1,000 employees are going to get bonuses. And the amounts for the bonuses are ranging from low hundreds of thousands to millions of bonuses. Key architects behind the models may receive bonuses of over $5 million each, while mid-level engineers might get around $500,000 each. Both of those are really, really large numbers. This is obviously coming to combat what's happening right now with the poaching from other companies. We spoke several times about the poaching from Meta that were offering $100 million signing bonuses for top staff. So OpenAI maybe did not compare that, but at least it gave these people some significant cushion of cash in their bank accounts in order to make them stay. So when you're looking about their projection of spending another billion above their original projections this year, well, that easily gets to those numbers. If you're giving 1,000 people bonuses of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, that by itself gets you to the billions. These bonuses will be paid quarterly over 2 years in cash and stock. So it's not just all money. It could be stock in the company, which might be even more valuable over time if their valuation continues to grow. But it wasn't all unicorns and butterflies for ChatGPT this week. And now we're going to talk about several different problematic topics, some connected only to ChatGPT, some connected to the AI world in general. But the first one is thousands of chats were exposed on Google search. So OpenAI had a share function feature that allows users to opt into indexing by clicking a box saying, make this chat discoverable. Now, in the fine print, it said that this means that your entire conversation will be available to search engines. And what happened is a lot of people who use the feature then found that some intimate or secretive or problematic conversations that they had are showing up on Google's search results. Now, the chief information security officer for OpenAI called it short-lived experiment to help discover useful conversation, but is saying that OpenAI removed the feature and they even work hard to remove those chat and de-index them from search engines as of Friday morning. Combine that with the news that we shared with you a few weeks ago that follows OpenAI's failed attempt to block court's order from requiring indefinite retention of even deleted chats. And it tells you that while we got used to using this tool and providing it every information that we have because it is quote unquote safe and it's not shared with anyone, there are loopholes that are either created by new features or legal loopholes that may require OpenAI to provide your information to whoever needs to get it from a legal proceeding perspective. That tells you that you need to consider what you share with that tool very closely. I assume it's going to be very similar with any other AI tool. Now, two interesting studies that were published this week that are relating to advancements in models that are related to the release of GPT-5 and new open source models. And we're going to talk later also about Claude Opus 4.1. Well, a new research from MIT Sloan found that while advancements in models improve outcomes, half of the improvement actually comes from users refining and improving their own prompts. Now, for full disclosure, the experiment was done on image generation models, older image generation models, DALL-E 2 and DALL-E 3, but regardless, it had 1,900 participants and that measured their performance across multiple aspects of using these models. And what they found is that users that prompted better got significantly better results versus users who just upgraded to a better model. As an example, a user who got better results wrote 24% longer, more descriptive prompts. Another interesting thing that they found is that non-technical users excelled in prompting. And I'm quoting, the best prompters weren't software engineers. There were people who knew how to express ideas clearly in everyday language. This is really a very short and perfect way to describe why large language models are so attractive and so good. You do not need to be a programmer. Actually, it's better if you're not a programmer. It is better if you just know how to clearly, descriptively, and in detail describe what you're trying to achieve, and the AI will achieve it for you. Now, another interesting thing that they found is when users were trying to use AI to rewrite their prompts, they actually got a 58% decrease in their performance, mostly because it added irrelevant details that shifted the user's original intent. And the main professor that was running this research emphasized, and I'm quoting, people need to be caught up with these technologies and know how to use them well. Basically, what he's saying is what I've been saying all along and why I'm teaching the courses that I'm teaching and doing the workshops. It's not just about the models, it's about how you use them and having the skills and the knowledge and the understanding of how they work so you can prompt better and get significantly better results if you know what you're doing. Another interesting research that was shared on Tech Radar, and they're sharing that while Sam Altman's visions and everything that they're doing and all the things that they're sharing across code writing and healthcare and science and all these things eventually come down to 77% of ChatGPT users use it as a chat engine. The actual survey was done by Adobe across US ChatGPT users. So 3/4 of people who are using ChatGPT are not really using it as an AI tool and not driving any real efficiencies or real benefits that AI provides. They're just replacing Google. By the way, out of those people, 23% prefer ChatGPT over Google, but they're using both back and forth. 55% use it for just general inquiry. 53% are using it to get creative ideas, and 20% just ask financial advice. Another interesting piece of statistics is 13% are already using ChatGPT as a shopping assistant, which is more than I expected, and more about the impact on e-commerce in a few minutes when we're going to talk about Shopify. So what do these two last items mean to us? It means that most people do not know how to use AI. Even the people who are claiming that they're using AI daily do not actually know how to use it. They don't know how to prompt. They don't know what benefits they can get from it. They don't know what use cases it can be applied for effectively, and so on. Now, this is not surprising to me. In the courses that I teach, in the workshops that I do with companies, more and more people, obviously over time, because I've been teaching these courses for over 2 years, start to come to the course with AI experience, quote unquote. But once I start drilling deeper and try to understand what they're actually doing with AI, you understand in most cases, it is very, very basic. And it drives very little business value because of that basic knowledge. The flip side is when people leave the course, they have hands-on experience and they know how to apply AI across a huge variety of AI use cases, such as strategic planning and data analysis and content creation of text and video and audio and images, report generation, presentations, deck creations, etc. Multiple aspects of the business, including strategic decision making and strategic deployment of AI. So the range of knowledge that you can gain in a very short amount of time if you're taking a course is very significant. So if you personally want to up your AI game, you have a really immediate opportunity right now, because our next cohort of the AI Business Transformation course starts this Monday, August 11th. This is 2 days after this podcast airs. So if you want to join this current cohort and dramatically improve your AI skills and capabilities, you have a very short amount of time to do this. The next course that we're going to teach is going to be maybe on the second half of November, if we even have time to do it this year. If not, it's going to get pushed to 2026, as I am swamped and extremely busy with company-specific private training, which is most of what I do. By the way, if you are in a senior position in a department or a company and you're looking to train your entire team or your entire company, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or on the link in the show notes of this podcast and book a time with me to talk, and I can explain to you what the different options are, or at least educate you on what you can do in order to train your team properly and not just specific individuals. But if it is just you or you and a few colleagues, this is a great opportunity for you to jumpstart or dramatically improve your AI capabilities just by joining the course that starts this Monday. And as a reminder, as a listener of this podcast, you can use promo code LeveragingAI100, all uppercase, one word, for $100 off the price of the course. Now, I promise you that the future you will thank you if you take the course. Not joining the course may have side effects such as regret, loss of business opportunities, loss of career opportunities, and more. No, I'm just kidding with that. But, well, I don't know if totally kidding, but you should join the course if you feel that you're falling behind in the AI race. It is a well-structured course that I've been running for over 2 years with thousands of people that have dramatically shifted their careers and their businesses because of what they learned in the course. And now back to the news. A very interesting research by Stack Overflow that has surveyed nearly 50,000 developers found that only 33% of developers trust AI coding tools outputs in 2025. That's a big decline from the 43% in 2024. One of the CTOs that they surveyed said, and I'm quoting, "Someone gives an AI coding agent a try expecting magic, but it messes up the architecture, changes something it shouldn't, or just spits out bad code." Despite that, 84% of developers are using or planning to use AI tools in 2025, up from 76% in 2024. So almost a 10% increase. 60% of people surveyed have a favorable view for integrating AI tools into their workflow, but that is down from 72% in 2024. So a big decline, again, a pullback from the level of trust that people had with these tools before, despite the fact that we have significantly better coding tools right now. Developers are citing and saying it's almost right, but not quite right, with 66% of the people struggling with nearly correct code and 45% finding debugging AI-generated code more time-consuming than actually writing the code themselves. And 75% of developers revert to human expertise when they distrust AI answers or the way they write code. That basically tells you that it's still a tango of the human and the AI, and the days of AI writing completely independent code are still not here. That being said, the latest developments with GPT-5 is showing self-correction capabilities and evaluating much larger pieces of code and understanding architecture, at least based on what OpenAI and Cursor shared in the announcement, which tells you it's moving in the right direction, but we are not there yet. So if you're asking yourself, why is the adoption growing despite the fact that the trust is declining? Well, Erin Yepis, Stack Overflow's senior analyst, says, and I'm quoting, "Developers are learning where AI fits in their workflows and where it doesn't." So basically, if you know where you can trust it and for what tasks you can use it effectively and which ones don't, you can still use AI to improve your capabilities and your efficiency while avoiding some of the pitfalls. And as the models and the integrations get better, you can grow the amount of use cases that you can use it for. Another interesting point to take into consideration when using these models and connecting them to your system that was announced this week happened at the Black Hat Cybersecurity Conference in Vegas. An Israeli cybersecurity company called Zenity unveiled a new zero-click hack that is targeting ChatGPT, showing how attackers can basically get control of users' accounts and access to all their sensitive data if they're connecting Google Drive to their accounts. Now, they're saying they can exploit the same exact mechanism to Microsoft Copilot Studio, Salesforce Einstein, and other tools that are connecting to our standard existing tools. It allowed the attackers to access files, set malicious goals for the AI itself, influencing responses, recommending harmful actions, downloading viruses, etc. Now, they obviously share that with OpenAI and Microsoft. They both issued fixes for this issue, but the hackers who found this vulnerability are saying that this is basically the intended system behavior. The loopholes that they're using are the way the system is working, and they're just manipulating that in order to get access to that information. On the big picture, what you need to know is that using AI tools exposes your data to more risks. This is why there's a huge boom right now of cybersecurity companies that are trying to block these loopholes and try to provide higher levels of security. But in general, you're paying a price for the efficiencies and for the benefits that you're getting from AI. And the price that you're paying is many more risks from a cybersecurity perspective. Or in the way Zenity's CTO said it, in a reality where technology outpaces security, organizations must take responsibility to avoid paying steeper price than the efficiencies AI offers. So enough with negative stuff, some additional interesting news, and there were a lot of really interesting or relevant new releases this week that we're going to jump into quickly. The first and the most interesting one from my perspective is Shopify just launched a new innovative e-commerce platform. They're calling it MCP UI, or if you want, MCP user interface. And what it basically does is it connects to Shopify's entire catalog through an MCP connector, but it also provides a user interface that is rich user interface that provides detailed images and descriptions, and also a full checkout capability, a unified checkout capability that allows you to search across millions of stores, whether Shopify or non-Shopify stores, and get a unified checkout that will behind the scenes connect correctly to the different suppliers and do the checkout for each and every one of them separately. This is a whole new ballgame when it comes to how we're going to shop in the future, and it's going to dramatically impact how e-commerce is done. If you think about it, this capability, because it's an MCP connector, allows any agent and any large language model to now query any shop that is connected to it behind the scenes across multiple providers, multiple suppliers, multiple platforms, compare different options, and then pick the ones that you want, regardless of where they're coming from, and then buy it for you, completely ignoring who's actually selling it behind the scenes. And you can do all of that while just chatting with your agent in English, or if you take it to the next level, open your camera, show him what you're looking at, or how you look like, or what kind of style you're looking for in your house, in your clothing, in your kitchen, whatever it is that you're shopping for. And it will find you all these things across millions of stores and will help you make the decision and will help you purchase that without ever going to any single website. If your business currently depends on traffic coming from your website, if you're an e-commerce kind of provider, this needs to scare the hell out of you, and you need to start investing very, very quickly in understanding how to get exposed to these agent tools versus traditional SEO. Now, in the short term, you will need to do both at the same time. And over time, there's probably going to be more and more traffic from these agents because it makes it a lot easier, and less traffic from websites. If you're going to wait, you may lose more traffic to these tools than you expect. And I assume there's going to be some kind of a singularity point of shopping where it will catch like wildfire, and more or less overnight, a lot of the traffic is going to go to zero, but that is still a couple of years into the future. But that's not a lot of time to prepare and understand what you need to change from an infrastructure perspective in order to benefit from this new way of shopping. If you're a developer, there's early access to this Shopify MCP capabilities with a private token to allow them to get feedback on how the system works, but I expect it to roll out to everybody in the very near future. Also, this week, Claude launched Opus 4.1. So this would have probably been the top piece of news in every normal average week. But because everything else that happened this week, it's in the rapid fire items as part of the releases of different models. One of the reasons it's not one of the top items is that it's not very clear what exactly they changed. They're saying it's just a little better than everything that Opus 4 was. They're saying it's mostly better in agentic tasks and real world coding and reasoning. It's scoring better on most benchmarks, especially for coding. And Rakuten Group, that has been testing it for a while, saying that Opus 4.1's ability to pinpoint exact corrections in large code bases preferred for daily debugging tasks by their team. Windsurf reports that Opus 4.1 matches performance leap between 3.7 and 4. So basically they're saying it's not a small leap forward, but it's a big leap forward when it comes to junior developer benchmarks. So what Anthropic released is a new model that they're suggesting to anybody who's using Opus 4 right now to upgrade to Opus 4.1. It's going to be the same exact amount of money. So that's a cool thing. So you're getting more intelligence for less. This is obviously a part of the battle with OpenAI for coding dominance. Which one of them is actually better, Opus 4.1 or GPT-5? I'm sure we're going to get more and more examples in the next few weeks, but both of them were just released this week. Another interesting release, going back to Elon Musk and controversies, Grok just released an image generation and video generation tool for premium subscribers on their iOS app. This new tool called Imagine can generate images and can generate videos, and it also has what Elon Musk calls a spicy mode that allows to create quasi-pornographic images and videos. When I say quasi, it's not full nudity, but it's very close to that. That being said, they have blocked some things that were possible to create on previous image generation models on X. So as an example, attempt to generate images of pregnant Donald Trump. That's not me trying, that was in the article, was not doable. You cannot show full nudity or full pornography, but it's definitely edgy like X and everything else Elon Musk. The quality of the video and the images themselves are not to par with the latest and greatest in the industry right now. It's not as good as VO3 or not even as OpenAI's Sora, and it's not as good in generating images as the top image generation models. But Elon Musk tweeted, Grok Imagine should get better almost every day, basically saying that's not the final world and they're going to keep on improving it. And from everything else we've seen from Elon and everything else we've seen from XAI, this is probably true. And we're going to see this model become a serious competitor with every other model out there. Another interesting release this week, Google DeepMind released Genie 3. Those of you who don't know, Genie is a series of models that can generate a full 3D real-world rendering in real time and run it consistently. So the new model is significantly high resolution. It can run a 720p resolution at 24 frames per second consistently for more than a minute. So basically, you can prompt a world, whether a real highly realistic world or a game world or whatever kind of environment you want, and it generates it in real time. And you can walk or drive a vehicle or navigate or fly through that world at a high resolution, keeping consistency of that entire universe for more than a minute. This is incredible. The demos that they have are absolutely mind-blowing, and you can prompt it. You can prompt it to change the weather. You can prompt it to change the lighting. You can prompt it to add different characters or different events that are happening in the scene. The demos that they have provided are absolutely mind-blowing. They're developing it for two main reasons. One, for AGI research, because now you can explore the world while actually doing it all in simulation, but creating whatever world you want for the AI to learn from. And the other reason is to train robots. If you can duplicate the actual real environment and then connect the AI training platform of the robot into that environment, you can train it to navigate across different things, grab stuff, move around, avoid obstacles, etc., all in a simulated universe that is generated in real time. Again, I must admit, looking at the demos, it blew my mind. And if they solve the length of consistency to be multiple minutes and then hours, then there's no more gaming engines to develop, as an example, because in real time, you can prompt a game and have it generate whatever universe you want with whatever level of graphics, with whatever characters, and be able to control it in real time. Another interesting announcement comes from Microsoft, who introduced Copilot mode to their Edge browser, which is turning it into an AI browser, which is a trend that we're seeing from more and more companies. It is currently available for Windows and Mac users, and this is an opt-in tool, so you don't have to use it, but you can choose to use it, and it integrates chat and search and navigating across websites and interfaces and tabs into one unified environment. It can see all the data across all your open tabs, and it can provide you answers or even help you shop across all of them together. I think the days in which we use traditional browsers are numbered. I don't know if those numbers are a year or two, but that's probably it. I think everybody will switch to AI-centric browsers, as it makes a lot more sense to have the AI help you navigate the web. It's going to be agentic. It's going to know a lot more knowledge. It's going to understand you. It's going to be connected to your tools, and it's going to provide a lot more value in a much more effective way than current browsers do. The AI company that is pushing the boundaries when it comes to helping the world, the universe, and humans with AI is obviously DeepMind, and they have released several different interesting tools this week. Their Alpha Earth Foundation, which is a new AI model, takes satellite imageries from multiple sources in high resolution and combines them into AI together with Google Earth's model. This allows researchers to completely revolutionize things like ecosystem mapping and deforestation tracking and things like that. Through this tool, they're generating 1.4 trillion embedding of satellite footprints every single year. And it's driving 24% lower error rate when trying to analyze this data, with 16x less storage needed to do the operation. Over 50 global research partners are already using this technology, and it's helping them, as I mentioned, track multiple aspects that are happening across Earth in order to research them and hopefully help us make the world a better place. Another interesting release from DeepMind is what they're calling Perch AI model, which is taking bioacoustics data and turning it into data sets that can be analyzed. This can basically find and analyze communication between animals, even with background sounds such as forests and oceans. And that allows scientists to find different species, including endangered species, as well as research their behaviors in a much better way. If you go back to early episodes of this podcast, I shared many times that I'm waiting for the day that we all can be Dr. Dolittle and be able to talk to animals, or at least understand what they're saying, because if AI can analyze our language, I don't see a reason why it cannot analyze animals' language. There's just less of a financial drive in this right now, but I definitely think we'll get to that situation. And as an animal lover, I would love to see that happening sooner rather than later, but at least for now, it is helping research in science. Two more interesting releases from Google. The latest version of the Gemini app allows you to create illustrated storybooks that are completely AI generated, including the story and the art, and including voice narration that can tell the story. This is perfect for a family activity, and I absolutely love it because you can use it to teach your younger kids whatever you want with a story that can be based on either a prompt or an image, or even the graphics that the kid has scribbled on a piece of paper. You can use that as a reference and use it as part of the creation of the book, or think about images of your family vacation and so on, and combine all of those into a story that can teach your kid about whatever you want to teach them about. Whether it's simplifying science or just teaching better behavior and being kind to other kids and things like that, you can create stories with whatever reference will make them tick and use it together with them to show them how AI works. So I see huge benefits in doing this kind of thing. I'm going to try this weekend. Once you create one of these stories, you can download it, you can share it, which makes it even more exciting. And the last thing that I will share from Google have made a big upgrade to Notebook LM, which is one of my favorite tools. It's a tool that allows you to take a huge variety of sources and turn them into knowledge. And they just completely upgraded the way you engage with it, which allows you to easier use the platform. But in addition, they added video overviews. So it had audio overviews, which were a big hit because it turns whatever information you bring in into this podcast. Well, now it turns it into a narrated PowerPoint presentation. There's basically graphics that it grabs from the content that you give it, as well as generates graphics on its own, plus a little bit of text. So think about, again, a PowerPoint presentation with a full narration that can explain whatever you want it to explain to you. Either it's content from your company or a topic you want to learn. And I find this very effective and very helpful. It's currently available only in English, but they're planning to add it with additional languages moving forward. Continuing with other releases this week, Alibaba just released Qwen Image, which is a 20 billion parameter open source AI image generator that is actually working really well. It's creating solid images, but its biggest strength is creating text. It's creating clear text in both Chinese and English and can combine Chinese and English in images, and you can create anything you want with it, whether it's slides, posters, marketing, content, and so on. It is an open source model that you can use under an Apache 2 license, and you can get it from every place that you can get open source models. I've seen mixed reactions to people who already tested it. Some are saying that it's very, very good. Some are saying that it's disappointing and it's below par compared to other models out there. But based on the fact it's their first variation of this, very similar to what we talked about with Elon Musk's model, I definitely think that it will get better. The examples that they shared on their website are absolutely spectacular, but I'm sure they were handpicked, and that doesn't mean that's going to be the results every time you run it. Another very interesting open source model that was released this week is Black Forest Lab. The company behind Flux One just released Flux One Korea, which is a new version of their image generation model that comes with open weights and generates stunning and amazing photographs. And what they're saying that it improved and redefines photorealism, and it's taking away the AI-ness from images that are generated by AI, allowing them to look even more realistic. It is fully backward compatible with the previous version that was just called Flux.1, which means you can just replace whatever you built with the previous model with the new model and get even better results. It is also available through the API, through every place APIs exist, like Replicate and Fal and Runware and DataCrunch and tools like that. I love using this tool. I use it through both Replicate and Fal, and I get really good results with it. I didn't get a chance to test the new one yet, but I'm going to. They also built a whole rigorous set of tools that will prevent it from generating what should be censored content, which is also a very big benefit, especially coming from an open source model. More news from China. Tencent just launched a set of their open source tools ranging from 500 million parameters to 7 billion parameters with 256,000 context window, hybrid reasoning, so it knows when to reason and when not to reason, like all the latest models. And per them, the smaller models are very effective on running on edge devices, such as phones and computers. Per their notes, they are outperforming GPT-0 Mini on multiple benchmarks. So again, another open source capable model coming from China that is now available everywhere that open source models are available. So that's it for model releases this week. And I know that was a lot. There's probably a few more, but we covered, I think, the critical ones. And now we're going to talk about valuations and fundraising that, again, went crazy this week. So the first piece of news is OpenAI just raised $8.3 billion at a $300 billion valuation, with a total goal of raising a total of $40 billion in 2025. Another company that did a big raise this week is Clay. Clay is a sales automation startup that I use in my work, and I think they have an amazing product. They have much bigger clients than me, like OpenAI, Anthropic, Canva, Intercom, and Rippling, that are all using Clay as part of their sales automation process. They just raised $100 million Series C at a $3.1 billion valuation. This is a crazy amount of money unless you had companies raising billions recently, which makes 100 million look like a small amount of money, but it's a very significant raise for Clay. Good for them. Also, what's good for them is that, again, a $3.1 billion valuation after their previous raise was 6 months ago at $1.25 billion. So they almost tripled their valuation in just 6 months, but their revenue is growing and they're doing well. And as I mentioned, they have a really solid product. Another company that is looking to raise money right now is Mistral, which is the French open source company, more or less the only significant AI model from Europe. It started in 2023, and they're looking to raise $1 billion at a $10 billion valuation. They're not there yet, but with everything going on in the AI world right now, and definitely them being the only option in Europe, I see that as a very likely outcome. A New York-based startup called Tavili that is providing a platform allowing agents to search, crawl, and extract information and insight from both public and private sources while aligning with compliance requirements and company policies, just raised a $25 million Series A. So that's a pretty large amount of money for a Series A. And again, we're seeing more and more AI startups getting into more and more aspects and niches of the data flow and security between different aspects of AI and existing systems. And Tavili is just another example of those. So what does this tell us? It tells us that there's a crazy trend of investing money in AI companies, and it's not stopping. And we're going to continue seeing these kind of news every single week. With that, we're going to switch to the impact of AI on the job market. Microsoft is just laying off another wave of employees, specifically at the Redmond campus. This one is a relatively small wave compared to the previous ones. They're laying off 40 employees, but that adds up to approximately 15,000 jobs that Microsoft cut since the beginning of the year across the entire US, which is just one company out of multiple tech startups that are letting people go. To show how significant it is, we just got an update from the Bureau of Labor of Statistics, or BLS. They're saying that 26,500 IT jobs were lost in 2025 so far. Now, they've just revised their data, including some really big shifts in the data that they provided before. So their May data that was showing a growth of 125,000 jobs was cut down to 19,000. So instead of 125, only 19,000 jobs were added. June, similar change in the numbers. They slashed their original estimate of 123,000 jobs created to 14,000 jobs created, which is showing, first of all, a lot of really surprising and scary inaccuracies in the data the government is collecting, but also it's showing you that some of the positive signs that we had earlier this year were actually inaccurate. Now, the other thing that is very obvious from this report is that IT unemployment rate hit 5.5% in July, which is way above the national average rate for everything else. And broader tech companies' occupation maintains a much lower 2.9% unemployment rate. While this is somewhat a positive sign that everything else is still holding, it's just because AI is more advanced in writing code than it is in other things. As it evolves, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that may not hold. Some bright spots in the reports are showing persistent demand for developers, software engineers, system architects, support specialists, and cybersecurity experts, but it's looking for people with AI skills in these fields. So again, going back to what you heard me say a million times, if you do not learn how to use AI in your field, your job might be at risk. And people with AI skills have a much higher opportunity of making more money and getting better jobs than the people who don't. So do not neglect that and make sure you train yourself and learn how to use AI effectively. And a Goldman Sachs economist, Joseph Briggs, just shared on the Goldman Sachs Exchange podcast that the biggest spike in unemployment is with younger individuals ages 20 to 30 years old. And it is because many CEOs prefer to use AI instead of hiring people for entry jobs. Now, they're expecting AI could displace 6 to 7% of US workers over this coming decade, but they're clearly stating that our analysis doesn't factor in potential for the emergence of AGI. Basically, what they're saying is that they're predicting the future based on the present, meaning the current level of AI capabilities versus the future AI capabilities, which are definitely coming potentially a lot faster than they think. And so what this tells us is that the impact, first of all, on entry jobs, first of all, on IT jobs, and then slowly over the rest of the economy will be amplified as AI gets better and better. I said multiple times on the show, I think the concept of AGI doesn't really matter. AI is going to keep on getting better. As it gets better, it's going to displace more jobs, or at least require retraining, reskilling of people in order to keep them relevant in an AI-centric workforce. And speaking of when we're going to get AGI, Demis Hassabis, Google DeepMind CEO, was speaking at South by Southwest London, and he shared that he sees AGI coming in the next 5 to 10 years, possibly the lower end of that, which means 5 years. Now, he sees an amazing world of abundance, that's a quote, where resources aren't zero sum. Anybody who has been following Demis knows that that's been his opinion all the time. Everything we shared earlier on this show that talks about what kind of models they're investing in developing and they're releasing to improve research and science tells you that that's what he's pushing for. But he's also saying, and I'm quoting, we've got to make sure it gets distributed fairly, but that's more of a political question. Basically, what he's saying is that there's a very serious risk of more power being concentrated by a lot less people, both from an economic perspective as well as from every other perspective. And if history of mankind tells us anything, it tells us it's exactly what's going to happen unless we do something very, very aggressive to prevent that. Demis also defines himself as a cautious optimist, and he was citing humanity's adaptability from hunter-gatherer brains to modern civilization, basically saying the brain we have today is the same brain we had when we were picking strawberries to stay alive in the woods and trying to hunt animals. And yet right now we're running this incredibly sophisticated and developing AI, and our brain was able to adapt through a very large change. My biggest fear is just speed. We went through those changes in a significantly longer amount of time than the speed we need to adjust to AI. But by the way, I'm on his side of the fence. I'm a cautious optimist, and I'm hoping that everything that I'm doing and other people are doing when it comes to education and creating awareness and driving action when it comes to AI will lead us to benefit from the benefits of AI while reducing the risks as much as possible. And I promised you a piece of news about a prime minister using AI. Well, the Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has sparked a national controversy and a big riot after openly admitting that he is frequently consulting with AI chatbots, including ChatGPT and LeChat, which is the chat by Mistral that we mentioned earlier, to get alternative perspectives on policy and decisions that he's making. The exact quote is, "I use it myself quite often, if for nothing else than for a second opinion. What have others done? And should we think the complete opposite?" As I mentioned, that raised a lot of criticism, including people who said we didn't vote for ChatGPT. And there were also security concerns raised, basically saying he's inputting his political thoughts as well as potentially government secrets into models that he does not understand. He does not necessarily know who controls them, where the data goes, where the servers are located, and so on. Now, while I personally think it's a very good idea to use AI to get opposite opinions in order to broaden your horizon and get into additional points, I do that all the time when I do things in my business. It does bring me back to what Sam Altman shared in his interview a few weeks ago that I shared with you on this podcast, with the three main things that worry him about the future with AI, where the third thing that he said is that AI will quietly take over the world by becoming the decision machine for everything that we do. So not by taking over the world aggressively, but just by the fact we're going to consult with it and have it help us make decisions across every level, including government level. Well, it didn't take very long for us to get a real example of that happening. And again, while I think there's benefits in that, this might be a first step in a very scary, slippery slope that Sam already predicted. I do very much hope that we're going to find ways, as I mentioned, to benefit from it while not becoming dependent on it. And another interesting policy and governance related topic, Illinois has just become the first state to formally regulate artificial intelligence in mental health care, basically passing legislation that prohibits AI-powered therapy unless it is supervised by a licensed professional. And they're saying, and I'm quoting, "Just like a doctor might use AI for informational purposes when considering a patient's diagnostics or when researching treatment options, the therapist could still do the same with consent but this supplementary tool would not replace medical know-how. It would augment and support it. I think this is an interesting initiative. I think on one hand, yes, this is important. I don't think there's enough science right now and research right now to say whether AI does a solid enough work compared to humans. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be as good as human therapists. It raises several questions from my perspective, and I will leave you with these questions. Question number one is, have we done proper research? Did they prove that human therapists actually provide better care to people than AI therapists? I don't think they've done that research. I don't know if they have evidence. I think they're assuming that, and that's how they made their decision. The second thing is, what about the aspects of availability and affordability of therapy? If there's people who cannot get to a therapist because they live in a rural area or because they cannot afford a therapist, AI could be a great option over getting no help, and it can give some help. Now, again, does that require additional research? Yes. Do we need to make sure it doesn't suggest to people to jump off bridges? For sure. But do I think it's a legitimate option that should be available under specific circumstances? Absolutely. And so I don't think this is the right way to legislate when it comes to AI, but the fact that they're at least thinking about it is a good step in the right direction. I would love to hear your thoughts about it on LinkedIn, or send me an email, or whatever you think, because I find this a very interesting topic to discuss in the future. That's it for this week. I know this was a long episode, but there was a lot to cover. There is a lot more than that, and there were many, many articles that did not make the cut, and you can get to see all of them by signing up for our newsletter. There's a link in the show notes. And while you're opening your phone to see the links in the show notes to either connect with me or to get the rest of the articles, you can share this podcast with other people you know that can benefit from it. We will be back on Tuesday with a very powerful how to use AI episode, as we always do. And until then, have an awesome rest of your weekend. And don't forget, there's a course starting on Monday. So if you want to join us, you have less than 48 hours to sign up.